So this is a Heel to the Face podcast. I'm Jared.
I'm Brandon.
And 22 years ago, the Hamilton Tiger Cats last won their Canadian Football League championship. This year, they did not. And another thing that didn't happen this year since 1999, well, anybody in WWE taking their top off on pay-per-view. We'll talk that and so much more as the Heel to the Face podcast for this week starts right now.
Fans celebrate with me from Rome to Rochester.
Bad luck seems to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
This is the Heel to the Face podcast for another week, as we are the penultimate week, I guess you would say. That word I learned about 2 years ago from Michael Cole, and I've been using it a lot ever since. Before the end of the year, or at least our final episode this week, we're going to kind of wrap some things up in the world of wrestling. And next week, hopefully, we'll give you some of our final end of the year totals. Our favorite matches, our superstar of the year, all that kind of good stuff.
I can't believe it's the end of the year already. 2022 is here. That's crazy.
Yeah, 2020. I don't call it 2022. I call it 2020 also.
2020. That's good. I mean we've been in this pandemic for 2 years almost. This is crazy, but at least we're having good wrestling to keep us occupied while things are still crazy in the world. So, I mean, I'll let you take it away.
But it's crazy because like the way that we introed the show is that it was 22 years ago, about 3 days ago, the most, and I put it on Twitter, and it's probably the most liked Twitter tweet I've ever had. Jerry the King Lawler, thank you for retweeting it out to your followers, your 1 million followers as well. He liked it as well. I don't know why he liked it so much because he got to see it all the time at home back then. And it was kind of strange that he liked it too, because again, this is not his current wife. You know what I mean? That'd be like somebody saying something about like an ex-girlfriend of mine and being like, "Yeah, that was awesome," But Miss Cat took her top off for the brief less than 1 second back in Armageddon 1999.
And actually, I did see some of the comments or the.
Yeah, I didn't put out the actual screenshot, but some of the other people did.
Yeah, somebody put the shot out.
And that's exactly what it was. That's exactly the screenshot, because literally, if you were to press play. Literally, as soon as you press play, that's gone. Like that's how quick that happened.
No, it was like a blink of an eye.
It was a blink of an eye kind of thing. That's why it's one of the most paused moments in professional wrestling tape history. And what I found really rare about that and unfortunate about something like that is things like that were more common when I was like 11 or 12 years old, that there was more vulgarity and there was more nudity. And now that I'm of an age where it would be, I guess, more appropriate, wrestling is the complete opposite. So I watched all the TVMA nudity, violence, fake rape, gun stuff when I was a kid. Yep. And now that I'm an adult, I watch the G-rated wrestling that exists. I think it should have been the other way around.
And that goes for concerts too. Like back in the day, you'd see a lot of tits hanging out at the concerts and stuff. I don't think you see it as much these days.
Just like in the world of movies, or music or anything, your tastes don't normally. Well, I guess in music maybe, but in movies, your tastes don't normally digress. You don't normally when you're a kid, you're not normally a fan of The Godfather and Scarface, and then as an adult, you're a fan of Toy Story and Aladdin. Because that's how the wrestling world is. When I was a kid, people were getting thrown off of cells. Women were taking their tops off. And now that I'm an adult, it's none of that stuff. And it's like a much more tamed PG product.
Yeah, I mean, and the bright side of all that too is they're putting more focus, on the women's wrestling side, which is I think is great and important. I mean, the women's evolution was one of the best things that we've seen in recent memory. It went from like the joke was, oh, the women are on, let's go use the restroom or go to the concessions. Now it's like, oh no, I'm sitting my ass down or I'm standing up and watching this match because it's that good.
But you got to admit, it's things like, people always say that the women's revolution today is trailblazing. That is true. But you got to say that stuff is trailblazing in the sense like Miss Cat taking her top off, or Jacqueline overseas doing the same thing, or Sable incidents, because it's those things that when you were a kid that got you to watch wrestling, which you can kind of look at today.
I'm not going to deny it.
Why you still watch wrestling?
I'm not going to deny it,
because if that stuff didn't grab your attention then, you might not have watched wrestling then, and you might not be watching it now.
I'll be honest. I think it was 98, 99, Sable with the paw prints.
Yeah.
I remember that pretty vaguely. I look at my dad.
As unfortunate as it is, it's the bad parts of wrestling which got me to watch wrestling to begin with.
Probably.
If that stuff didn't happen when I watched SmackDown's debut episode, if that kind of stuff didn't draw me in, then I would have turned away, and I still probably would have never turned. Obviously, I don't think I would have become a wrestling fan as an adult. It had to be that grab me in fully, because now it's more harder. Now you wonder why you still watch wrestling sometimes, and it gets a little more, there's days unlike what we saw at AEW this week, days unlike that in which make you wonder why you still watch wrestling. But
I went through a phase. When I was in college back in the mid 2000s, like the 07 through 10, kind of in that area, I tuned out for a while. I went caught up eventually, but I don't know, something just turned me off. And then one day I said, you know what? Let me see what this old wrestling stuff looks like these days. And that's what happened.
But to talk about the things that keep us watching wrestling, we'll segue right into All Elite Wrestling. Winter is coming. And unlike last year's Winter is Coming, where the big thing was Sting making his debut, last night the big debut was no debut. It was better than that. It was just great wrestling.
Yeah, and you had a 60-minute barn burner that ended up in a draw, which I got a few nitpicks on that. With AEW, I think what they need to do is you're going to have a 60-minute match like that. The thing that turns me off is that picture-in-picture commercial stuff, because to me it like ruins like the you're not really hearing the audience, you're not seeing you're not really. For me,
I think the match was long enough though that there was a lot of it not on commercial. It just was such a long match.
Well, sure,
it just kept going.
But here's the thing: AEW. What I would do is you get one of those big sponsors like a State Farm, like they were talking about, and say, hey, we want you, or we want this company, or like have some sort of billboard, like where, you have a live read during the commentary where you're not going to those cutaways and things like that, where it's like, oh, this hour is supported by our great friends at State Farm.
Well, you just got to make sure. But I guess the issue with that though is that you're then giving away how long this match is going to be. If you're like, this hour is commercial free.
Well, it was already given away though, because it was like 60 minutes. You knew it was going to be 60 minutes. So you're like. It was a title match. I had
no idea. I was very surprised. I didn't think.
I wasn't at all.
Because this is regular television. You know it's going to be a good match for sure. I'm glad they kicked off the show. That's a way to really draw you in.
They emphasized it. Like, oh, it's a 60-minute time limit. I'm like, okay.
I guess because I didn't have the audio on because I was watching it here in studio where I was doing other things audio-wise. So I didn't have the audio on. So I guess I didn't know that because I didn't hear the audio and I was just watching the match.
The way Justin Roberts kind of said that, I'm like, okay, so this is going 60. The thing that disappointed me about the match, and I'm going to get to all the good stuff in a second because there's a lot of great stuff. The thing that disappointed me was another Bryan Danielson match ends in a draw for a championship. I didn't like that. I didn't like the finish there. I wanted to see somebody come out on top. I wanted to see who was going to win. But overall, from start to finish, minus the last 10 seconds where it looked like the Buckshot Lariat was going to finish the match. For Hangman, the match was great. There was so much back and forth. There was so many like moves that were hit, submissions. We were like, okay, are they going to tap out? Are they going to get the 1, 2, 3? Like it kept the audience, myself included, on my toes. And I'm like, I can't leave the room, which I did for like the picture in picture, but. From that point, I didn't even look at my phone. I was just locked in. It was just that good.
And I don't think anybody, it's crazy because Dynamite's only 2 hours long. And, I still think that I would never, even with, like that match taking up a half of the show, I would still rather go to a Monday Night Raw in which one match takes up half of the show than go to a Monday Night Raw and where there's an hour-long match or whatever that's 3 hours long. Like, I don't feel like, in that sense, like, even if Raw put on a match that was 1 hour long and you're like, oh, I can see why, I still feel like Raw that week would be too long if it was a 1 hour match and then 2 hours worth of other matches. I think nobody there felt that they only saw 3 matches that night, so they felt, gypped. Because if you get something like, it's like the in-your-house pay-per-views back in the day. You only got an hour and a half of wrestling, essentially, on pay-per-view. But it was a good hour and a half.
Yeah, it was just nonstop action.
Yeah, nobody feels ripped off. I would have been perfectly fine with being in the crowd last night for that Dynamite versus, let's say, the Dynamite I went to. I would have preferred that one, despite the fact that one match took up an hour. Because it's a meaningful hour.
It was. I wish I was in the audience for that because that from start to finish, to me it was one of the best matches I've seen of the year. The only issue I have is with the finish. But here's the thing: they started the night off with that, and they end the night with MJF. You couldn't have drawn it up better. MJF is pure money, and I know there's a lot of chatter about MJF these days. maybe dipping his toes in the water in the other brand someday.
Well,
but
that's also someday. I saw that on the docket about, a lot of people have been reporting WWE, interested, aka USA Network, Fox Network's interested in MJF. But the problem with reporting about any of that now is it doesn't mean anything now because he's under contract till 2024.
Yeah, he's got 2 years.
So it's pretty worthless to even talk about because where will WWE be in 2024? Last I remember, things that they're really gung-ho about today, they're not that gung-ho about in like 3 years. They kind of aren't that kind of company. Last I remember, Bray Wyatt was the hottest thing, 1 year ago? Yeah, things change.
Yeah, now he's currently not working in WWE.
So to tell me what, they're going to care about MJF in 2024, let's wait till 2024 to see where MJF is
honestly,
and where WWE is.
To answer that question, I think so. I think MJF is one of those talents where he's going to be box office for the next decade.
I hope so, yeah.
I mean, if he can pretty much, at that point, it could be one of the bidding war. It could be like, okay, who's going to offer me more money, Tony or Vince? He's going to command a lot of money. I know we're going to get to Kevin Owens' contract in a little bit, but MJF's going to probably surpass that. That's how much of a commodity he is, and he knows it. He's going to, he's going to make some big time money. And here's the thing: it's only 2 years away. Let's be honest.
You say that only 2 years. I'm not exactly sure where in 2024. I guess his contract comes to an
maybe
end.
2.5 years.
Yeah,
but still, it's not that far away.
A lot can change. I mean, as we saw 2.5 years ago, WrestleMania was a one-night only thing that was going to only ever be one night.
I'll just say this:
and now we're on a 2-night.
I just hope
get
something
rid of
doesn't
December
happen.
pay-per-view.
I just don't want like a Velveteen Dream thing happening because Velveteen Dream was like the next big thing. Like he was getting pushed heavily, and then all his out of the ring incidents kind of came to light. And guess what? Has anyone heard a peep from Velveteen Dream since? No. So I'm hoping,
because every time I think they try to, they shut it right back down.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I just, obviously I hope none of that obviously happens in general, but like we just don't want any out of the ring situation shenanigans. I think MJF's got a good head on his shoulders. I know he's a very sarcastic individual. I just hope he works. He kind of works on that kind of gray area. He kind of walks that tight line a little bit with things he says. If he stays right on that, I think he'll be all right.
So Kevin Owens just recently re-signed to WWE, and it's in that category of, well, WWE is not going to lose everybody. And here's an example. Kevin Owens is not leaving WWE. He just recently re-signed for what is estimated to be between $2 and $3 million per year, which, I mean, I'm not up on the current salaries, but I mean, I remember 5 or 6 years ago, there was only a real slim amount of people making $1 million a year.
Yeah, I don't
and
think,
it wasn't the Kevin Owens caliber guys. It was like the Undertaker, John Cena.
There's not many people making that, the millions. I mean, the general number that I've seen is high 6 figures or mid 6 figures is what I generally have seen from talent. I mean, Randy Orton's making more than that. Randy Orton, I think, is making about 3.5 is what what I've seen, what it's been reported. We don't really know the actual number, but I think he's a little bit higher than Kevin Owens. I mean, it's weird though because Riddle doesn't make as much as people think he does. I think he's maybe $500,000 a year, which for what he brings to the table, I hope he renegotiates.
Well, it's like with all athleticism and all athletes, it's not about what essentially you're making today. It's you're potentially working today for your next contract.
Yeah.
So
100%.
yes, he's on the upswing today, but
Roman
has
Reigns
he
is
signed
another
anything new since his NXT days, or is he still kind of riding on that?
No, he did get a new contract. I think he signed. I don't know the exact details offhand, but I think. Not, I would say fairly recently. I think he got a 2-year extension. I think I could be wrong, but
to see hopefully what happens with RK Bro and if that gets him maybe into a singles program himself.
Well, here's the thing: if WWE is offering or giving Kevin Owens $2 to $3 million a year, that tells me they have big plans for his future. That just tells me that right away. They don't just offer anybody $2 to $3 million. Just, hey, we're gonna have you come sit in. Well, maybe it's Dolph Ziggler because Dolph Ziggler is kind of those guys. Dolph Ziggler's $1 million. He makes. I think he makes over $1 million annually. And what are they really doing with him? Not much.
I mean, I would actually be kind of like, I'd be a little surprised that he makes over $1 million, just because, again, he's not a main eventer, I guess, and he doesn't even really need to make it because he could make a little bit less, but he would, in the end, make more than a lot of other people just for his longevity. I always look at it from like the kicker of, football perspective of they make the least amount of salary, but they make the most amount of money because over the years.
If they're good,
so like if a Dolph Ziggler is only making $500,000, he's probably making the equivalent of whatever Bray Wyatt made because, 5 years before Husky Harris showed up, Dolph Ziggler Ziggler was there, and 5 years after Husky Harris, Bray Wyatt's gone, Dolph Ziggler's still there. I'd rather make $500,000 a year and be in the company for 15 straight years without, or like a Kofi Kingston. I'd rather be making $500,000 and be Kofi Kingston than be making $1 million and be some of these guys that are like, around for 2 years and then never to be heard from again, a Ryback's or something situation.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You get that long, steady paycheck, and if you're good, you're good. And Dolph Ziggler is one of those guys. He's just consistent. Miz, same thing. Miz is definitely clearing $1 million. Plus, I mean, Miz is a kind of a different animal too.
Miz is probably making more money outside of WWE.
Yeah, he's got other stuff going on, TV shows. He's doing a lot of. He's one of those guys. He's not making John Cena or Rock money, but he's not struggling. Let's just say.
Speaking of people who were top of the food chain probably 1 year ago, who obviously joined Bray Wyatt this past 2021 as surprising releases, and that's Braun Strowman, also known in real life as Adam Shear, made his return to the wrestling world from his hiatus, I guess. This past Saturday night at Ring of Honor's Final Battle pay-per-view, End of an Era.
Actually, he was at a different show before that.
Oh, yeah. Was it actually? Didn't he do the thing with EC3 before that?
Yes, it was in Wisconsin, I think it was. Yeah.
I thought that was like a weird.
Yeah, it was.
This is his first live appearance?
He was in front of a crowd. He was in front of a crowd in Wisconsin. I forget it was a small venue in Wisconsin. It was a few weeks before Ring of Honor. I did see that. He came out. He did something with EC3. But this is his first mainstream,
which is confusing, obviously, for the fact that it was Ring of Honor's final pay-per-view before they take a hiatus and return in April. But it really felt like a final pay-per-view under what it currently is. It'd be like NXT. Yes, NXT's still around, but if NXT took a hiatus and came back as NXT 2.0, you could have sent, or ECW back in the day, it went under the WWE brand. You're like, no, it died in 2001. It didn't die in 2009. It died in 2001.
Yeah, that's not the original ECW.
Yeah, so for Ring of Honor to pretty much go uninterrupted since around 2003 up until now, it is curious what's going to happen. But for now, all of their talent is released and has chances to go elsewhere. So we'll see who they bring back. They crowned Jonathan Gresham the new Ring of Honor World Champion after Bandito, the champion at the time. He had COVID issues, so he didn't show up to the show. I don't necessarily know if that's a future storyline down the line with not losing,
not actually. It's like you relinquished it. You didn't actually lose it.
But it was actually really cool to see because Jonathan Gresham and Jay Lethal fought in the main event for this championship, in which they crowned like the old championship belt, like the original belt, on top of the new belt that they use. But they brought back the original belt and crowned him that. But the entire locker room came out and surrounded ringside and watched the match. And it was something that you don't normally see. You know what I mean? Like, it looked like a lumberjack match, but unlike a lumberjack match, it was like crowded. You know what I mean? Like, they were all banging on the apron, watching this match, the whole locker room. But we did see some.
How cool is that?
We saw some other cool things as well as this last Ring of Honor pay-per-view before they take a hiatus, and that was FTR making a public appearance, against challenging the Briscoes. That would be a match that I would love to see down the line for sure.
I agree 100%. I think both tag teams, their styles, I think they're some of the best tag teams in the world, and I would love to see those two teams lock horns.
Deonna Purrazzo, with her Impact Championship, came out and made an appearance as well. There was a lot of cool vignettes with CM Punk and Adam Cole and, just a ton of guys, Jimmy Jacobs, just, a ton of guys that just talked about their time in Ring of Honor and they want to be where they are without Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
None of those guys made public appearances. They did like little, video packages, if you will. But quite the alumni that have come through Ring of Honor. And if there's a couple YouTube videos on it, and it's crazy to see just the ups and downs that Ring of Honor has faced, with it being, a low promotion to rising up. About 2 years ago, you could easily say Ring of Honor is the second biggest wrestling promotion in the United States.
Yep, until AEW came around. Yep.
Yeah, they were going, up and down where they were like, a wrestling fans company, and then they kind of went underground a little bit while Impact got some time in the spotlight, and then they like resurged again. Like, I've gone to a few Ring of Honor shows. I've gone from when it was the Supercard of Honor, which is what they'll be returning with in April, in Detroit 2007, when that was one of the only things to accompany WrestleMania weekend. That was the only other thing other than the Hall of Fame and other than WWE, but it was the only non-WWE thing to accompany WrestleMania that weekend. And they were big enough then to travel. It was a small crowd of probably 1,000 people. But I was, seeing the likes of Bryan Danielson then.
Sure.
I was seeing Jimmy Jacobs. I was seeing Christopher Daniels and all those kind of people, and Nigel McGuinness at Ring of Honor, Supercard of Honor.
There's been so many talented individuals that have come
and
through
rose
those doors.
and that was the night before WrestleMania that I attended that in 2007. And then in 2018, the night before WrestleMania, I was attending Ring of Honor in front of 9,000 people in New Orleans, and then the next year with a joint production of New Japan Wrestling in front of like 20,000 at Madison Square Garden.
How cool!
Yeah, and it is
cool
crazy to see that this company has definitely had its hills and its valleys for sure.
Well, we'll see what happens when they assuming they come back, and hopefully it's the longevity's there, because right now the talent pool, I'm just telling you right now, AEW is collecting so much talent. There's only so much airtime that they can give to this talent. So my thinking is, one of these other promotions like a GCW, for example, maybe they collect some talent, because eventually some of these AEW wrestlers are going to be like, well, I want to be on TV. I want to be in a match. I want to be in front of a crowd. I want to do these things, and sometimes there's not enough TV time or just event time to do this. So I could see another promotion popping up if Ring of Honor, if it's not fully back.
Just curious what Ring of Honor essentially will bring to the table. And more importantly, I guess the hiatus is one thing, but it's the fact that they're releasing all the talent to then go out on their world. So it'll be weird to see when they open back up who essentially will be coming back. I mean, is the Adam Shears of the world, who made his debut with EC3 as the change the narrative, is what they essentially are going by, pretty much trying to mark their own path. But maybe the Adam Shears of the world, maybe he's making his Ring of Honor debut in the sense of he can afford to take the time off and say, listen, I understand I'm not under contract. I'll make a debut for you. And then maybe I won't do anything until you guys come back, and I'll kind of take the holidays off, and I'll join back up with you guys in April.
Yeah, take a few months off.
Some of these other guys, you wonder, if the layoff, it'll be a little bit too long. And then the Dalton Castles of the world will say, I need to go elsewhere and sign, and then be, officially out of Ring of Honor.
Or what they'll just do is you'll just see them going to random independent shows across the country as they're popping up. That's the thing with this whole thing with Ring of Honor kind of cleaning house. It's actually really good for the independent circuit, because there's going to be so much talent that is available that maybe they couldn't be available because of scheduling issues with Ring of Honor. So I think if you can get to your local promotion, I think you're going to see some good wrestling. The wrestling's been pretty decent, but I would say it's going to be even better for the foreseeable future, I think.
So taking the wrestling world of independent wrestling news this past week was down in Texas. It was a Texas Championship Wrestling match that featured Devin Nicholson, who also goes by Hannibal the Blood Hunter in the independent wrestling world. He is a Canadian who has quite the long history, whether it be from trying out for the Canadian Football League or making $2.1 million in a settlement from Abdul the Butcher, claiming he got hepatitis C from Abdul the Butcher cutting himself and the blood running onto Devin Nicholson, to being a Greco-Roman wrestler representing Canada and trying to represent Canada in many Olympics, being in the PWI Top 500 a few different occasions, including 2015. Well, not so good this past week when he was facing Carlito for the Texas Championship Wrestling title down in Texas. I don't know the town in Texas it took place, but in a I guess a bit with referee Lando Del Toro, a bit that went a little bit too wrong. I guess it was supposed to happen, but it went a little too far, and he got stabbed up pretty good when this guy attacked the referee and stabbed him in the head, and resulted in a lot of blood loss. The pictures show, stitches and staples in the head.
Yeah.
And this guy was not doing so well. There's a GoFundMe page to pay for some of his hospital bills. But a lot of stuff is coming out about this guy being an unsafe worker, and nobody should book him anymore. There was stories, I think, on the Toronto Sun where he's going to be banned from competing in wrestling companies around that area if he wants to.
Wow.
All I know is I don't know the guy too well, but, a lot of people out there that say he's an unsafe worker. I'm not saying he is or isn't, because I don't know really anything about his history. There's, a lot of people are coming out saying there's sexual allegations and all this other stuff. Yeah. But I will say this much. Yes, it looks like it went too far. But at the same time, he's got quite a track record. He's been in independent wrestling since 2001. And with all these things of people saying he's an unsafe worker.
How would he have lasted this long?
Yeah, how he lasted this long. And essentially these things, I guess, should have been brought to light long before he had an opportunity to do something like this. The referee says this wasn't a work. this really did happen. He did say, though, it was something that was kind of supposed to happen that went too far. So, yes, I mean, this is not, I guess, condoned, and I guess it's going to probably end his time in the world of professional wrestling. I think it's going to be his early retirement at the age of, I think, 42 years old. But at the same time, again, he lasted this long. He made it in the PWI Top 500 in 2015. So, if some of these allegations of him being an unsafe worker were essentially very true all along, I mean, he wouldn't have had so many matches under his belt.
Yeah, he wouldn't have made it on the PWI list.
I'm not saying anybody out there is wrong if they're saying that, any of these allegations are true, these unsafe worker, but I just feel like a lot of this stuff should have been brought to light a long time ago.
But there's a lot of wrestlers that sometimes the styles just don't mesh, and like, it just happens that way. A lot of
people were like looking at him and like he was like channeling his inner New Jack in this. That's what a lot of people were saying.
And here's the thing, like Goldberg, a lot of people thought he was a little more stiff than he should have been. Mm-hmm. Sometimes styles with certain wrestlers just don't mesh. And then there's some that, like, I forget who it was, but it was essentially like, don't, hit me hard, mm-hmm. but don't knock me out. But if you give me a love tap and it looks like you threw it like a pansy, mm-hmm. then it's just a bad look. So it's like, you have to find that right look where it looks real. It looks like it hurts, because sometimes it probably does, but you don't want to go too far and like actually hurt.
I think the best solution for this is that fact that he sued Abdul the Butcher and had a lawsuit against him many years ago in a match that they had, and he ended up trying for $5 million, but got $2.5 million in the settlement. So if he did indeed get $2.5 million, that's a good sum of money, and it seems like that would be a great time to maybe call it early retirement and let bygones be bygones and be done with the world of professional wrestling. And hey, maybe even use some of that to help this referee show in good spirits that maybe pay his hospital bills or whatever as well. Yeah. And then just swan song off and say, you know what, it did go too far. I apologize, but I'm going to step aside from the world of professional wrestling. I've been doing it. He's been in the indie since 2001. So I think that's long enough in the time that WWE probably ain't going to hire you after any of this stuff.
No.
And WWE hasn't hired you by now. So
you're probably, your chances of making it to WWE is probably
I think it's time to just move on from the world of professional wrestling. As speaking of moving on from professional wrestling, a lot of people are inquisiting about what we talked about last week, and that's Jeff Hardy's release. He did come out. He showed up on Matt Hardy's Twitch channel and said a few things. He's doing all right, and promoted a bunch of upcoming acoustic music concerts that he's having, as well as meet and greets, which make you wonder, because he's got a whole like kind of little tour lined up in a week or two.
Yeah.
A lot of people have speculated. I'll ask you this question. Do you think this release situation was kind of planned out to get released so that he could leave WWE? Because it just seems very suspicious. I don't know if overnight he just booked this tour that's happening in like a week and going through January.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to assume anything. I mean, we don't know the whole story behind it, the real story, I should say. But it is kind of convenient that things got booked really quick. I'll just say that. And here's the thing: if anybody caught the Broken Skull sessions, he loves music, he loves art, so regardless of what he does, he's going to make a good living. And according to reports out there, I mean, the Hardy boys have saved their money. It's not like Jeff needs to go do wrestling shows to survive the rest of his life. Maybe music and art, he can just do that, and it might be better for him because maybe it keeps him away from what got him into the addiction cycle that he's had. Maybe doing music, maybe getting out of wrestling. That might be a good idea. But who knows? You never know in wrestling because no one's really retired, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, they've been going since they were 16 years old.
It's been a long time.
Yes. So they've been in the WWE in and out for a very long time.
The most important thing is, I mean, according to the stuff that I've seen out there, he, like Matt agreed with him, according to these reports, that he didn't need rehab. So that kind of makes me feel like maybe this was kind of one of those things where he's like, I'm burnt out. I don't want to do it anymore. Maybe I just need a break.
Yeah, I mean, either way, if you want to go meet Jeff Hardy, he's got a whole slew of dates where he's going to play some music and he's going to have some meet and greets set up. So that'll be interesting. A couple final takes before we head out for the week. It's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, the Canadian SmackDowns and Raws that were moved to the fall. Well, WWE still does have 2 house shows scheduled for the end of this month over the holiday week. And it's going to be interesting because at least in Ontario, all venues in that area are going to be limited to 50% capacity, and things when it comes to like, mask mandates or more or less, like schools going back to remote learning, they're picking up real quick. And I know these shows are only in about 2 weeks' time. So there's a house show in Montreal, in Laval, which is outside Montreal, and in Toronto, both at American Hockey League arenas that fit about 8,000 people. But it's going to be very curious to see if these shows end up happening as things are progressing really quickly when it comes to COVID mandates and measures they're taking right now in Ontario.
Especially Canada.
Yeah, so it'll be curious to see if these house shows end up taking place. From what I looked right now, the Toronto house show has sold very well. Tickets are starting at like $200 with what's left for that Toronto house show. I don't know if just because they haven't had WWE in such a long time and it's such a small venue.
It's probably I mean, it's probably they want to get their fix and they're like, okay, if we can't see them in once 2022 is official, why don't I try to go see it now before we don't know when we're going to see them again?
Yeah, so we'll pay attention to how that goes, and next week we will talk a bunch of different shows that we got on the horizon because next week will be our last show before the new year, so we will have.
Is it our last show tonight?
It is because we're not going to have a show last week. Surprise! We're not going to have a show.
See, I didn't know. We didn't talk about it yet.
So next week will be our last show until the new year, right before the holiday season. We're going to talk day one. We'll give our previews for day one pay-per-view.
Wait, hold on. I got to cut you off. So you're going out of town? Is that
Yeah, most likely, yeah.
Yeah, I figured. Okay. Not to cut you
Not
off.
to day one. I wish maybe. Who knows? I mean, I still got 2 weeks to decide, right?
He'll be there.
We'll talk day one pay-per-view. We will talk Wrestle Kingdom a little bit. You forget about that. That's another one that's sneaking up. New Japan Wrestling, Wrestle Kingdom. They started this whole 2-night thing, so you can thank them for that. WWE fans like myself, giving WWE the idea of having your biggest event be 2 nights. Thought I liked you, New Japan, but apparently not so much. But we'll talk that. But more importantly, we'll talk our best end of the year stuff.
It's gonna be fun.
Potentially, who knows? Maybe our favorite match of the year is the one we most recently watched.
It's quite possible.
We'll decide. And we'll have our opinions on that, Wrestler of the Year, and so much more. Until then, he's Brandon. I'm Jared, and this has been another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast.